She stood frozen as her husband grabbed another woman's waist right in front of 300 guests. 10 minutes later, that same husband would be on his knees, begging her not to destroy him. But it was already too late. For 3 years, Dominic Mercer treated his wife Fiona like furniture, a quiet decoration in his billion-dollar life. He gave her an allowance for groceries. He forbade her from speaking at business events. He paraded his mistress in front of her face. He was absolutely convinced she was powerless. He had no idea that the mysterious architect everyone was desperate to meet, the genius behind the city's most iconic buildings, the person the mayor himself came to honor tonight, was the very wife he had just humiliated. This is the story of how a forgotten woman became the most powerful person in the room, and how one arrogant billionaire lost everything in a single night. If you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or trapped in a situation where no one sees your true worth, this story is for you. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the power. The silence in the massive penthouse felt heavy and suffocating. It was not a peaceful quiet, but the tense stillness that comes right before a storm. Fiona stood in front of a giant, wall-sized mirror in their bedroom, her hands shaking just a little as she smoothed the strap of her navy blue dress. The gown was simple and tasteful, exactly the kind of understated outfit Dominic always made her wear. Stay in the background. That was the command he had given her over breakfast, while his eyes were glued to his tablet. You are there to support me, Fiona, not to make a scene. Support. That was the polite word he used to cover up the truth, which was for her to simply disappear behind him. At that moment, the door to the suite opened and Dominic Mercer strode in. His presence was overwhelming. He was tall with broad shoulders, wearing a custom-made tuxedo from the most exclusive tailor in London. He checked his own reflection in the mirror, fiddling with his cufflinks without even a single glance in his wife's direction. The car is waiting downstairs, Dominic announced, his voice clipped and impatient. We are already 10 minutes behind schedule. Winston will be there, and I have to catch him before the auction gets underway. Fiona turned toward him, hoping for just a small sign of approval. How do I look, Dominic? Dominic stopped what he was doing and finally looked at her. His eyes were cold and critical, sizing her up like a business asset that was underperforming. He offered no smile. His expression did not soften. He just gave a quick, dismissive nod. It is fine, he said. Appropriate. Just stick to the rules, Fiona. Smile, nod, and do not engage in business conversations. These people are ruthless. They will destroy someone like you. Someone like me, Fiona repeated, her voice barely a whisper. And what kind of person is that, Dominic? He let out a heavy sigh, the sound of a man frustrated with a clueless child. Someone who cannot grasp the complicated nature of my life. Someone who gets to enjoy all this luxury without understanding the immense pressure that comes with it. Just try not to be an embarrassment tonight. Bianca will be there, handling the public relations, and I need this entire evening to be perfect. Her name felt like a physical blow. Bianca was his public relations director, the woman who always stood a bit too close to him in photographs for the press. The woman who always gave Fiona a look that was a mix of condescension and pity. Oh, is she? Fiona replied, her voice remaining surprisingly firm even as her heart tightened. I imagine she will also be dressed in something appropriate. Dominic's jaw clenched in anger. Do not start this, Fiona. Not on a night like this. This deal with the Concencade Group is valued at $200 million. If I secure it, the Mercer Empire expands worldwide. Now get in the car. He spun around and left, leaving the door wide open behind him. Fiona just stared at his back as he walked away. For 3 years, she had dutifully played her part. She was the quiet orphan girl he had saved from a dead-end job at a bookstore. He adored that story. The billionaire prince who rescued his own Cinderella. But he never cared to find out the rest of her story. He never inquired about her life before the bookstore. He never showed any interest in the design notebooks she secretly filled every night. She turned back to the mirror. The navy dress felt plain and lifeless. It was the uniform of a minor character in someone else's story. Fiona reached deep into her closet, behind the rows of bland beige clothing he had picked out for her. Her fingers found the cool, smooth silk of a garment bag she had hidden there. For a moment, she paused. Tonight was the Grand Obsidian Gala. All of the city's most important people would be there. If she dared to go off script, Dominic would be absolutely enraged. But then she replayed the contempt in his voice. Someone like you? A new determination hardened in Fiona's eyes. She pulled down the zipper on the hidden bag. 10 minutes, she said quietly to the empty room. He can wait for 10 minutes. The drive in the limousine was filled with a cold, unspoken hostility. Dominic was on his phone for the entire 40-minute trip to the Ritz-Carlton, yelling commands at his staff. Fiona sat across from him, her trench coat buttoned up to her neck, hiding the secret she wore underneath. As soon as they pulled up, they were hit by a blinding storm of camera flashes. The photographers swarmed their car, desperate for a picture. Dominic, look this way. Mr. Mercer, are the merger rumors true? Dominic instantly switched on his public persona, flashing a confident, charming smile that never quite reached his eyes. He got out of the car, adjusted his jacket, and gave a wave to the crowd. Then, as if he had almost forgotten her, he turned and held out a hand for Fiona. She accepted it and stepped onto the red carpet. The sound was incredible. "Stay right beside me," Dominic muttered through a fake smile for the cameras. "And leave that coat on until we are inside. It is freezing out here." They navigated through the crowd and entered the magnificent ballroom. The room was a glittering spectacle of diamonds, designer gowns, and cutthroat ambition. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and generational wealth. A woman approached them almost immediately. She was a stunning figure in a dress made of little more than sparkling silver fabric and strategically placed cutouts. It was Bianca. "Dom," she said excitedly, completely ignoring Fiona. She laid a hand on his arm, her fingernails painted a brilliant red. "I am so glad you are here. Winston is at the bar, looking unimpressed. You need to go talk to him right now." Dominic's focus immediately shifted to her. "What is he drinking? Scotch or a martini? Is it an aged Scotch?" Bianca's eyes finally flickered over to Fiona. Her smile was forced and full of scorn. "Oh, hello, Fiona. I see you decided to come. How lovely. You should probably get yourself a drink and find a table somewhere in the back. The important business discussions will be happening up at the front." Fiona looked from Bianca to her husband. Dominic was already searching the room for his business target. "Go find us a table, Fiona," Dominic ordered, with a dismissive flick of his hand. "I will join you when dinner starts. Bianca needs to go over my talking points with me." "You are just going to leave me by myself?" Fiona asked. "You are not a toddler, are you?" Dominic shot back, his patience finally gone. "Just go sit down and do not speak to anyone of consequence. I am here to work." He completely turned his back to her. He and Bianca walked off together, their heads close, as she whispered something that made him laugh. Fiona was left standing all alone in the middle of the grand entrance. People flowed around her. She could hear their whispers. "Is that Mercer's wife? The quiet one. That poor woman. She looks like the help. Look at him over there with Bianca. It is not really a secret anymore, is it?" A deep, burning shame flushed her cheeks. But underneath that shame, a different feeling began to grow. It was the same fiery determination that had helped her survive after her parents died when she was just 18. It was the same fire that had pushed her to study relentlessly, even when she had no money for college. She was not the help. She was not a charity project. She noticed the coat check attendant, a young man named Leo she had seen at other events. He gave her a look of sympathy. "Mrs. Mercer, may I take your coat?" Fiona glanced over at Dominic. He was laughing and raising his glass with a group of investors. He seemed so powerful, so invincible. She then looked back at Leo. A slow, confident smile crept across her face. "Yes, Leo," she said. "You can take it. You can even burn it if you like." She slowly undid the buttons on her trench coat. The heavy fabric slipped from her shoulders and fell to the floor in a heap. The conversations around them did not just quiet down. They stopped completely. Underneath the plain coat, Fiona was not wearing the simple navy dress. She was in a gown that looked like it was spun from liquid gold. It was a strapless masterpiece, sculpted perfectly to her body, with fabric that shimmered like it was alive. It was daring. It was magnificent. It was also a design that nobody in that room could ever own, because it was a unique piece created by Ara, the secret, anonymous designer that every star in Hollywood was desperate to hire. But the dress was not the only surprise. Around her neck was a necklace that outshone the crystal chandeliers. It was a breathtaking cascade of sapphires and diamonds, a piece so famous and historical it could have been in a museum. Fiona raised her head high. She no longer looked like a timid housewife. She looked like a queen who had just taken her rightful throne. "Leo," she said, her voice now strong and full of authority, "where's the main event organizer? I have a keynote address to deliver." Leo's mouth fell open. You are the keynote speaker?" "The program says the speaker is the architect," Fiona replied smoothly. "That is me." She turned and started walking toward the center of the ballroom. The sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor was deliberate and strong. As she made her way into the main hall, heads began to turn, not just one or two at a time, but in entire sections. The buzz of conversation faded away, replaced by a stunned, collective silence. Dominic was still by the bar, smiling at a joke Winston had just told. Then he noticed Winston's eyes go wide. He saw Winston looking right past him. "My God," Winston breathed. "Who is that?" Dominic frowned, annoyed that Winston was no longer paying attention. Probably just some actress looking for attention. Ignore her, Winston. Now about that merger. "No, Dominic," Winston insisted, setting his drink down on the bar. "You need to look." Annoyed, Dominic turned around, and then the air left his lungs. He blinked, certain his eyes were deceiving him. Moving through the center of the ballroom, causing the crowd to part for her, was a vision in gold. The woman moved with a breathtaking elegance. She was brilliant. She was stunning. And she was his wife. Dominic Mercer felt a feeling he had never known before. Years. A wave of panic rose in his chest, clawing its way up his throat. He watched the woman in the gold dress glide through this party, pausing to take a glass of champagne from a waiter who looked starstruck. "Dominic," Bianca hissed, her fingernails digging into his tuxedo sleeve. "Who is that woman? Why is she wearing that? You told me she was a mouse." "I do not know," Dominic snapped, pulling his arm away. "Stay right here." He strode across the ballroom, his carefully practiced calm completely gone. He reached Fiona just as the mayor was about to greet her. Dominic gripped her upper arm tightly, steering her away from the center of the room and into the shadows of a large marble pillar. "What do you think you are doing?" Dominic whispered with fury, his face just inches from hers. "Have you completely lost your mind? Take that dress off." Fiona looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up to his eyes. Her expression was completely unreadable, with none of the fear he was used to seeing there. "Take it off," she repeated, her voice steady and laced with amusement. "We are in the middle of a grand ballroom, Dominic. That might cause a bit of a scandal, would it not?" "Do not play games with me," he growled. "Where did you get that dress? Where did you find the money? And that necklace? It is absurd. Everyone here knows I did not buy it for you. You look like a child playing dress-up in cheap jewelry. You are embarrassing me." Fiona let out a soft, dark laugh that sent an unexpected chill down Dominic's spine. "Embarrassing you?" she asked. "Dominic, just look around you." He paused, then shot a look over his shoulder. He fully expected to see people snickering, to see the city's elite mocking his wife for her desperate grab for attention. But instead, he saw pure admiration. He saw deep envy. The mayor was staring. The chief executive officer of a rival bank was staring. And most importantly, Winston Consincade, the one man Dominic had to impress to save his company, was staring at her with an expression of complete awe. "They are not laughing, Dominic," Fiona whispered, leaning closer to him. "They are captivated. You said you wanted a trophy wife, right? Well, here I am. All you have to do is polish me and show me off. Is that not my job?" "You?" Dominic began, but he was interrupted. "Dominic, you have to introduce us." It was Winston Consincade. The older billionaire walked toward them, a huge smile on his face. He completely ignored Dominic and directed all his charm toward Fiona. "Mrs. Mercer," Winston said with a slight bow, "I must tell you, I have been to these events for 40 years. I have never seen an entrance quite like that. You have brought some much-needed excitement to a very boring evening." Fiona smiled, but it was not her usual shy, nervous smile from home. This one was brilliant. "Mr. Consincade, I read your latest interview in Forbes about sustainable city development. It was a fascinating take on how to mix green energy with historical neighborhoods." Dominic froze in place. She read Forbes? Since when did she read anything besides romance paperbacks? Winston's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You actually read that? Most people told me it was incredibly dry. I am very impressed. I had no idea your husband was interested in my environmental projects." "Oh, he is not," Fiona said smoothly, giving Dominic a look that could shatter glass. "Dominic cares about the bottom line. I care about the horizon." Winston let out a loud laugh, slapping Dominic on the back. "This one is sharp, Mercer. Why have you been hiding her? Were you worried she would outshine you?" Dominic forced a tight, unnatural smile. "Fiona is just full of surprises tonight." Bianca suddenly appeared at Dominic's side, clearly sensing that she was losing her position. She looked Fiona up and down, her eyes fixated on the necklace. "That is a lovely costume, Fiona," Bianca said, her voice full of fake sweetness. "But are you not worried that giant blue stone is a little too much? It looks awfully heavy. Maybe you should take it off before you hurt your neck. Costume jewelry can be so terribly gaudy." The small group around them fell silent. It was a clear insult, suggesting the necklace was a fake. Fiona slowly turned her gaze toward Bianca. She did not get angry. Her face did not flush. She simply raised her hand and gently touched the large sapphire at the center. "This is not costume jewelry, Bianca," Fiona said in a low voice that everyone could hear. "This is the heart of the ocean, sister. It was created back in 1912. For the last 50 years, it has been locked away in a private vault in Geneva. It was only just released yesterday." Bianca scoffed. "And we are all supposed to believe that Dominic bought you a piece of history?" "Seriously, Dominic did not buy it," Fiona stated plainly. "Then who did?" Dominic demanded, his anger and jealousy flaring up. "Who bought you that necklace, Fiona?" Fiona looked him straight in the eye. "I did." A heavy silence fell over their group. Dominic just stared at her. You? With what money? The tiny allowance I give you for groceries? No, Fiona said, her voice becoming firm. With the money I earned. You see, Dominic, while you were so busy working late nights with Bianca, I was working too, but we can talk about my career later. Right now, the Master of Ceremonies is asking everyone to find their seats. I think the main speaker is about to start. She turned around and walked away, leaving Dominic, Bianca, and Winston standing there completely stunned. Curious, Winston said thoughtfully, watching her walk away. Very curious, Mercer. If you do not start treating that woman with respect, another man will. Dominic clenched his jaw. He felt as if the entire world was tilting beneath him. He needed to get back in control. He grabbed Bianca's hand. Come on, we need to sit down. I am getting to the bottom of all this the second we get home. The huge ballroom was now dimly lit, with spotlights shining on the main stage. Hundreds of guests were seated at large round tables covered in white tablecloths. Dominic was at the front table, which was reserved for top donors. Bianca sat to his left, and to his right was an empty chair where Fiona was supposed to be. Where did she go? Dominic muttered, glancing at his watch. She is causing a scene by not being here at our table. Maybe she ran to the bathroom to have a good cry, Bianca whispered while sipping her wine. You were pretty tough on her. She probably just realized she does not belong here. On the stage, the host tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice echoed through the hall. Tonight is a very special night of revelation. For the last 3 years, our city's skyline has been completely transformed. The new Opera House, the Solaris Tower, the revitalization of the West District. All of these incredible projects were designed by one single company, a company known only as Vertex Designs. It is led by an anonymous genius who the industry simply calls the architect. A wave of excited murmurs spread through the audience. Everyone had heard of Vertex Designs. They were the most sought-after architecture firm in the nation. Their projects were worth billions of dollars. But nobody knew who was in charge. Tonight, the host went on, to celebrate the launch of the Obsidian Charity Fund. The architect has finally agreed to reveal their identity and to auction off the original plans for the upcoming Skybridge project. Dominic leaned forward in his seat. This is it, he whispered to Bianca. If I can get my hands on those blueprints, the deal with Concencade is guaranteed. I have to find out who this architect is so I can make them an offer before the bidding even starts. Please give a warm welcome, the host shouted, pointing toward the stage curtains to the chief executive officer and lead designer of Vertex Designs. The heavy velvet curtains slowly pulled apart. Dominic lifted his glass, ready to make a toast to the old man or eccentric artist he assumed would walk out. A single figure stepped into the spotlight. The gold dress shimmered as if it were made of liquid fire. The sapphires around her neck captured the light, sending little blue reflections dancing all around the room. It was Fiona. The glass slipped from Dominic's fingers. It shattered on the table, spilling red wine all over the white tablecloth. He did not even notice. No, he whispered to himself, that is not possible. Fiona walked confidently to the podium. She calmly adjusted the microphone, her posture perfect. She looked out at the large crowd, her eyes sweeping across the dark room until they stopped on the front table. Right on Dominic. Good evening, she said. Her voice was now amplified, sounding rich and confident. It was the voice of a woman who commanded boardrooms, not a woman who had to ask for permission to buy new drapes for the living room. My name is Fiona Mercer, but in the world of design, you probably know me as the architect. The entire room exploded. There were gasps, loud applause, and shocked whispers filling the air. She is the architect. Mercer's wife, the quiet one. Oh my God. She is the one who designed the Solaris Tower. Dominic felt as though he could not get enough air into his lungs. The Solaris Tower. For months, he had been talking about how amazing that building was. He had told Fiona about it over dinner, while barely looking at her, saying that the man who designed it was a true visionary. He had been calling his own wife a visionary without ever really seeing her. On stage, Fiona was still speaking. For years, I chose to work from the shadows. I wanted my work to speak for me, but I have recently come to understand that being silent is not always a strength. Sometimes being silent is just giving in. And I am finished with giving in. She clicked a small remote in her hand. A giant screen behind her lit up, showing a detailed and beautiful three-dimensional model of a futuristic bridge that would connect the city's financial district with the harbor. "This is the Sky Bridge," Fiona announced. "It is my greatest work. It uses solar skin technology and wind-capturing support beams. It represents the future of this city." She paused, allowing everyone to take in the image. "Normally, I would sell this design to the person with the highest bid," she said. "But tonight is going to be different. Tonight, I am searching for a partner who truly understands value, not just a price tag." She looked straight at Dominic once more. The television crews focused their cameras on her face, projecting her intense stare onto the large screens on either side of the stage. "My husband," she said, letting the word hang in the air for a moment. "Dominic Mercer has been working very hard to close a development deal for the harbor with the Consincade Group. He is a man who believes that money is the only language that truly has power." Dominic's face turned white. She was revealing their private business in front of the entire city. "But Mr. Consincade," Fiona said, turning her head toward where Winston was sitting in the front row, "I know you are a man who values integrity, vision, and respect." Winston rose to his feet, his gaze fixed on Fiona. "That I do," Winston's voice thundered through the hall. No microphone needed. "In that case, I have a proposal for you," Fiona stated. "I own the land where the Sky Bridge is being built. I purchased it 3 years ago using the company name Vertex Designs. Dominic, you have spent the last 6 months trying to acquire that exact piece of land, correct? You have been yelling at your staff because some anonymous owner refused to sell." Dominic sank back into his seat. He had spent every day cursing the name of that landowner. It had been her. It was Fiona all along. "I am prepared to sign over both the land and the design to the Consincade Group," Fiona declared, completely free of charge. A collective gasp went through the audience. "Free?" a voice called out. "There is one condition," Fiona continued, her tone becoming ice cold. "The contract will have a clause that forbids the Mercer Corporation, and Dominic Mercer by name, from participating in this project in any way. He is to be completely blacklisted from its development." The announcement struck Dominic with the force of a physical punch. This was more than just public humiliation. She was systematically dismantling his career. This was the one deal that was meant to pull his company back from the brink of bankruptcy. Without this project, he was completely ruined. "You can't do this to me," Dominic shrieked, leaping from his seat. He paid no attention to the wine soaking his pants. "Fiona, you have to stop this madness right now. Security," Fiona spoke calmly into the microphone. "Could you please see that this disruptive person takes his seat? He is interrupting our presentation." 2 very large security guards began moving toward Dominic. His eyes darted around the room in a panic. Bianca had already slid her chair away, staring at him as if he were carrying a deadly disease. Winston Consincade strolled to the front of the stage. He glanced down at Dominic, then looked up at Fiona. "Mrs. Mercer," Winston began, "or perhaps I should call you Ms. Architect. You've got yourself a deal." A smile spread across Fiona's face. "Thank you, Winston. Now, if you all will excuse me, I have a celebration to get back to. And I do believe my husband has some bankruptcy forms to start filling out." She moved away from the podium just as the room exploded with thunderous applause, none of it for Dominic, but for the very woman who had just brought him to his knees. Dominic remained frozen, the sound of the clapping echoing in his head like a funeral bell. He watched Fiona, truly seeing her for the first time in years. A wave of nausea washed over him as he understood that the woman he had taken for granted was now the most influential person there, and he had lost her completely. The night, however, was far from over. Fiona still had another secret up her sleeve. The clapping finally faded, giving way to an electric buzz that crackled through the air. The entire mood of the event had changed. Dominic Mercer was no longer the apex predator. He had become the wounded prey, and he could feel the other predators starting to circle. He stood motionless by the stage, his face burning with a mix of fury and shame. He watched as Fiona came down the steps, instantly swarmed by a crowd of well-wishers. Winston Kincaid pumped her hand enthusiastically while the mayor waited patiently for his chance. Photographers jockeyed for the best possible shot. Dominic felt a touch on his shoulder. He spun around, hoping for a kind word from Bianca. "Well now," Bianca said, her voice like ice, gripping her small purse tightly. She stared at him with pure, unconcealed contempt. That was certainly an education. "Bianca," Dominic stuttered, seizing her arm, "you need to help me. You have to go manage the press. Create a new narrative. Tell them she's crazy. Tell them she ripped off my designs." Bianca let out a short, bitter laugh. She snatched her arm back, brushing at the silk of her gown where his fingers had been. "A new narrative?" Bianca repeated in disbelief. "Dominic?" The woman just demonstrated that she owns the very land your company's survival depends on. She just demonstrated that she created the blueprints you claimed as your own. "There is nothing to spin. You are done. I am still Dominic Mercer," he yelled, causing a few people to turn and look. "I still have assets. You have debt," Bianca interrupted sharply. "The whole city knows your company is mortgaged up to its eyeballs, just holding on for this deal with Kincaid. Now that it's gone, the banks will be calling in all your loans first thing Monday. I am a public relations manager, Dominic. My work is in reputation management, not bringing the dead back to life. And I have no interest in dating a broke man." She did not even bother to say goodbye. She simply pivoted and headed directly for a circle of hedge fund guys. Her brilliant smile was already plastered back on her face as she scanned the room for a new prospect. Dominic was completely alone. The mistress he had chosen over his own wife had ditched him without a second thought. A hot, blinding rage consumed him. He forced his way through the clusters of people, knocking a waiter out of his path. He had to reach Fiona. He had to force her to end this. She was his wife, after all. She was his property. She had no right to ruin him like this. Fiona was in the middle of laughing at one of Winston's jokes when she noticed Dominic barreling toward her. She did not even flinch. Her smile just vanished as she calmly watched his approach. Her face showed nothing but boredom. "Fiona," Dominic snapped, pushing his way into the exclusive group around her. "We are going home now." Winston Kincaid's expression soured, and he shifted to partially block Fiona. "Mr. Mercer, it seems to me your wife is enjoying herself. Maybe you ought to go and cool down for a bit." "She is my wife," Dominic screamed, his composure completely gone. He lunged forward to snatch Fiona's wrist. "You are not allowed to humiliate me this way, Fiona. Do you think you are clever? Is this all a game to you? I am the one who made you. I pulled you up from nothing." His fingers were just inches from her arm. Suddenly, a hand darted out from the surrounding crowd. It was a big, strong hand that locked onto Dominic's wrist like a vice made of steel, halting his movement instantly. Dominic glanced up. grimacing from the intense pressure. The man standing before him was someone Dominic knew by reputation, but they had never officially met. Sebastian Hale, he was a titan of the tech industry, a billionaire who built his fortune in software and aerospace. He was taller and broader than Dominic, and he had a dangerous, calm intensity that Dominic could never possess. Sebastian was famous for his cutthroat business tactics and for guarding his privacy. "I do believe," Sebastian said in a low, menacing voice, "that the lady has no desire to leave with you." Dominic attempted to pull his hand free, but Sebastian's grip was unyielding. "Let me go," Dominic hissed. "This is a private family issue. Stay out of it, Hale." "As a matter of fact," Sebastian replied, his gaze like ice, "it is my business. You see, Vertex Designs is a subsidiary of my company, Hale Industries." The air left Dominic's lungs. The entire room fell quiet once more. "What did you say?" Dominic breathed. Sebastian let go of Dominic's wrist with a hard push that made him stagger backward. He then stepped up to stand alongside Fiona, not shielding her like a bodyguard, but positioned next to her as an equal. He rested a hand lightly on the small of her back, a familiar gesture that made Dominic's gut twist. "Fiona didn't create Vertex all by herself," Sebastian announced to the shocked onlookers. "She required a silent partner to manage the legal side of things and ensure her own husband couldn't take credit for her genius. I was privileged to be that partner." Sebastian glanced down at Fiona, and for the first time all evening, his stone-like expression melted into a truly warm and genuine smile. "You were absolutely brilliant tonight, Elle. That projection mapping was a really nice touch." "Thanks, Seb," Fiona replied, returning his smile with an ease that broke Dominic's heart. "I thought the blue lighting on the bridge looked great." "Seb?" Dominic managed to choke out the name. "You know this guy?" Fiona turned her gaze back to Dominic, her expression once again like stone. "Sebastian and I were in college together, Dominic. We were both on full academic scholarship. While you were out wasting your father's money on parties, we were in the library studying until 3 in the morning. He has been my best friend for the last 10 years. "Best friend?" Dominic shot back, his finger trembling as he pointed. "You've been having an affair, you hypocrite." Sebastian took a threatening step forward, balling his hands into fists. But Fiona placed a hand on his chest, holding him back. "An affair?" Fiona laughed out loud. "Dominic, Sebastian has never once laid a hand on me in an improper way, unlike you and Bianca, or you and your secretary the year before, or the countless other women I have been aware of since the day we got married." "You knew about them?" Dominic stammered. "I know it all, Dominic," Fiona replied quietly. "I know about the secret offshore bank accounts you thought you had hidden. I know about the business loans you secured using my name, which, I should mention, is a crime. And I also know that you were going to hand me divorce papers the minute the Concade deal was signed, just so you could keep all the profits for yourself." She reached inside her gold purse and took out a folded document. "You were looking for a divorce?" she asked, throwing the document down at his feet. "Consider this an anniversary gift, darling. I already signed them this morning." The document fluttered down, landing on the slick marble floor with a quiet thud. Dominic just stared at it. It was real. The crowd was now buzzing with frantic whispers. This was more entertaining than any Hollywood movie. It was the complete downfall of a business giant, happening right before their eyes. "I can still fix this," Dominic muttered to himself, as the full weight of his predicament finally hit him. He turned to Winston. "Winston, I beg you. We can still make a deal. I'll give you a better price on the other properties." Winston just shook his head with a look of pity. "Dominic, you no longer have any properties to offer. What are you talking about?" Dominic blinked in confusion. "The bank was on the phone while you were making a scene," Winston explained, showing him his cell phone. "Bad news gets around quickly." Your assets have been frozen by the banks while they investigate the fraud allegations Fiona just brought up. At this moment, you own nothing. Dominic felt his legs buckle beneath him. He staggered, grabbing the corner of a table to stay upright. Fiona, he begged, his voice breaking. He looked up at her, desperately trying to use the same charm that had won her over 3 years before. Fiona, honey, please, we can work this out. I have been under a lot of stress. The pressure from the company, it just gets to me sometimes. But I do love you. You have to know that I love you. We can have a fresh start. With your skills and my contacts, we would be a powerhouse. Please don't destroy our marriage because you are angry right now. Fiona looked down at the man on the floor. Her eyes held no sympathy, just sheer exhaustion. I was in love with you, Dominic, she told him. I truly was. When I met you in that little bookstore, I believed you were my knight in shining armor. I chose to overlook the warning signs. I overlooked how you belittled the waitstaff. I overlooked how you would shut me down. Me. She moved a little closer. But love is meaningless without respect, she went on. And you did not just disrespect me. You made me invisible. You wanted a trophy, Dominic. Well, trophies do not forgive. She faced Sebastian. I am exhausted. Can we leave? Absolutely, Sebastian replied. He shot Dominic one final hard look. Do not even think about following us. Wait, Dominic struggled to his feet. What am I supposed to do if the banks lock my accounts? The penthouse? I can stay at the penthouse, can't I? Fiona paused. She did not look back. The penthouse? She asked, her voice carrying over her shoulder. Oh, I almost forgot. The company that manages the building. I purchased that last month as well. You are evicted, Dominic. They deactivated your keycard an hour ago. You cannot do that, Dominic shouted. That is my home. My clothes are in there. My watch collection. All of your things have been boxed up, Fiona said, with calm detachment. They are waiting for you with the doorman. Well, almost all of them. I gave your suits to a charity that helps men find jobs. I assumed you would not need tuxedos where you are headed. Where am I headed? Dominic cried out, his face now wet with tears. Fiona looked back at him one last time. She offered a smile, but it was filled with pity. I have no idea, Dominic. You are a smart guy. You will figure it out. Or you could ask Bianca if you can sleep on her couch. Oh, that is right. She is gone. She took Sebastian's arm. Let's go find a burger, Seb. I am starving. This gown is way too tight for a fancy dinner. Sebastian let out a rich, warm laugh. Anything you want. Burgers it is, then. They strode out of the ballroom together, leaving the wreckage of a life behind them. Camera flashes went off, capturing the scene of the brilliant architect and the tech giant leaving the shattered billionaire behind. Dominic was left standing alone in the middle of the room. The other guests began to slip away, clearly uncomfortable with such a raw, public breakdown. Waiters started to clean up the shattered glass from the wine he had dropped. A young waiter swept the fragments near Dominic's pricey Italian shoes. Excuse me, sir, the waiter said, his voice polite. You are standing right in the middle of this mess. Dominic glanced down. He saw the divorce papers scattered on the floor. He stared at the empty doorway his wife had just walked through. He realized he was not just standing in the mess. He was the mess. He collapsed to his knees and buried his face in his hands. And for the very first time in his life, Dominic Mercer wept. Not over a failed business deal, but because he finally understood that he had been given a diamond, treated it like a common stone, and then thrown it all away. 1 year later, the entire city of Vidia had been transformed. The skyline, once a rigid collection of gray concrete buildings, shrouded in industrial smog, was now cut by a masterpiece of modern engineering. A silvery ribbon of steel and glass arched across the sky, connecting the busy financial district to the old harbor with an elegance that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The Sky Bridge. It was more than just a bridge. It was a symbol. It was proof of a powerful vision, of resilience, and of the strength that comes from stepping into the light. It was the day of the official opening, and the atmosphere was electric. The media was out in full force, a huge crowd of reporters and camera operators, all fighting for the best spot. Drones buzzed in the air above, like futuristic hummingbirds, recording incredible aerial views of the stunning new structure. But this time, none of the cameras were pointed at Dominic Mercer. Nobody was looking for the man who had once treated this entire city like his own personal kingdom. They were all looking for Fiona. Fiona was standing right in the center of the bridge. The high-altitude wind blew her hair back, bringing with it the fresh scent of salt water and the clean air. She was wearing a white power suit that was sharp, tailored, and modern. It was a world away from the golden dress she had worn a year before, but it was every bit as powerful. The gold dress had been her armor for a rebellion. The white suit was the uniform of a true leader. She stood there confidently, her hands on the railing, feeling the gentle, steady vibration of the bridge under her feet. It felt alive, like it was breathing in rhythm with the city. Sebastian was right beside her. He looked handsome in a charcoal suit that was tailored perfectly to his large frame, but he was not paying attention to the architectural wonder around them. His eyes were completely focused on her. He looked at her with a mix of incredible pride and something much deeper. "Are you nervous?" Sebastian asked quietly, getting close so she could hear him over the howling wind and the faint noise of the crowd below. Fiona faced him, a slow, real smile spreading across her face. She looked down at the water, where the sun was sparkling on the waves like countless tiny diamonds. "No," she answered softly. "I built this, Seb. I calculated every single point of stress, every load-bearing element. I know it is going to hold." Sebastian smiled, and the corners of his eyes crinkled. "I was not talking about the bridge," Fiona laughed, a sound that was so free and light, it felt like it floated right up to the clouds. Her life had been a complete whirlwind since that unforgettable night at the Obsidian Gala. Vertex Designs had become a phenomenon, turning into the most in-demand architectural firm in the entire country. She was not a secret or the ghostwriter for her husband's ego anymore. She was not simply the architect. She was Fiona Mercer, though she planned to change that name soon, a celebrity herself, an icon for female empowerment, and a philanthropist who was genuinely passionate about the causes she supported. But even with all the success, the past still cast a long shadow. Fiona's eyes swept over the massive crowd gathered on the harbor promenade far below. Thousands of people were there to see the ribbon-cutting ceremony. From up there, they looked like a moving mosaic of bright colors. There were tourists aiming their cameras, local families pushing strollers, and construction workers in bright safety vests, all beaming with pride over what they had helped create. Her gaze, almost by instinct, shifted to the very edge of the crowd. In the back, standing by a cart selling steaming hot dogs, a man stood by himself. He had on a faded gray windbreaker that was clearly old and worn, with the zipper jammed halfway. He appeared older than his 35 years old, and his shoulders were slumped, as if he were carrying the weight of the world. His hair, which used to be perfectly styled with expensive gels, was now thin and messy, tossed around by the harbor wind. He had not shaved in several days, and his stubble was patchy and turning gray. He was holding a tablet, but it was not the thin, high-tech, expensive model he used to carry like a symbol of his power in meetings. This was an old, cracked version, most likely bought at a second-hand store, or maybe found in a pawn shop. It was Dominic, He was not there to make a scene. He no longer had the energy, the money, or the sheer arrogance for that. After the gala, his downfall had been fast, merciless, and total. The investigation into his fraudulent dealings, which Fiona had started, took everything from him. The penthouse with the incredible view he never truly saw. The collection of expensive cars he hardly ever drove. The stock portfolio he constantly checked. All of it was taken to pay back the people he had cheated. He had avoided prison by the narrowest of margins, by pleading guilty and selling off every last hidden asset in his offshore accounts. Now Dominic Mercer, once known as the Prince of Vidya, had a job as a mid-level shift manager in a logistics warehouse on the edge of the city. It was a soul-crushing 9-to-5 job filled with clipboards, angry drivers, and harsh fluorescent lighting. He punched in and he punched out. He rented a tiny, drafty studio apartment in the East End, the same neighborhood he once made fun of for being dirty and having no potential. He was standing there now, watching the huge screens on the promenade that were broadcasting the ceremony live. On the screen, he saw Fiona's face in high definition. He noticed the sparkle in her eyes as she talked about bringing communities together. He saw her laugh at something Sebastian whispered to her. And he saw the way she looked at Sebastian. It was a look filled with complete trust, a sense of safety and pure love. It was a look Dominic had never worked for and had definitely never gotten. "She looks happy," a voice commented from right next to him. Dominic flinched, almost dropping his cracked tablet. He turned and saw an older man beside him in a plain baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to look like a tourist. But there was no mistaking that voice. "Mr. Kincaid," Dominic stammered. His back immediately went straight, a habit from his old life. I did not expect to see you down here with the regular crowd." Winston Kincaid pushed his sunglasses up, gazing at the silver curve of the bridge against the bright blue sky. "The view is actually better from down here," Winston said, in a thoughtful voice. "From this level, you can see the foundation. You can see the support pillars. You can appreciate what is really holding the whole thing up." He looked over at Dominic, his face impossible to read. "That is something you never took the time to see, did you, Dominic? You were always too focused on looking down from your penthouse." Dominic winced. The truth in those words hit him harder than the cold wind. He looked down at his worn-out shoes, made of cheap leather, that was pinching his feet. "I know," he said in a whisper. "You do not need to remind me, Winston. That is not my intention," Winston said gently, now facing him directly. "I am just glad that you are still on your feet. A lot of men would not have survived a fall like the one you took. It takes a lot of guts to start completely over from nothing." "I almost did not make it," Dominic confessed. The words just came out before he could hold them back. There were some nights, anyway. It does not matter anymore. He looked back at the giant screen. Fiona was holding a big pair of ceremonial scissors. Sebastian's hand rested lightly on top of hers, helping her, supporting her. The scene was a perfect picture of a partnership, a concept Dominic had never grasped. She was the brilliant one all along, was not she? Dominic said quietly, mostly to himself. "For all those years, I just thought she was doodling in her notebooks. I thought she was wasting her time with little hobbies. You know, I actually told her that. I told her she was wasting paper." "You saw what you wanted to see," Winston replied, his voice not filled with judgment, but with simple, undeniable truth. Weighed down by the truth. It happens to all of us sometimes. We look at the world through the filter of our own ego. But now that filter was shattered. Now you see the reality on the screen. Fiona's smile was brilliant, a true winner's smile, as she snipped the ribbon. A massive cheer erupted from the crowd around them. Cannons shot confetti. from the bridge's tall cables, creating a storm of gold and silver paper that floated down like a magical snowfall. Children laughed and yelled, running after the glittering pieces. Dominic felt a tight, aching knot forming in his throat. He thought back to the last words he ever spoke to her in that ballroom. They were desperate and cruel. He had told her she was nothing without him, that he was the one who made her. He understood now, with a painful and heartbreaking clearness, that he had been the heavy anchor holding her back. He was the one weighing her down. Once he was gone, she did not just stay afloat. She rocketed into the sky. "I need to leave now," Dominic said suddenly, flipping up the collar of his jacket. The celebration felt entirely too bright and much too loud for a ghost like him. "I have to be at work in an hour. If I show up late, they take money from my paycheck." "Good luck, Dominic," Winston said, offering a small, sad nod. Dominic simply turned and walked away. He made himself keep his eyes forward, refusing to glance back at the bridge. He did not look back at the flashing lights of the cameras or the woman dressed in white. He just kept walking toward the subway entrance, with his head bowed, disappearing into the flow of evening commuters. He was now just one more nameless person in the crowd. Another piece in the giant machine, discovering the hard way that the greatest luxury in life is not money or power or a fancy apartment with a view. It is having a person who truly sees you, who understands who you really are. And he had been completely blind to it all until it was far too late. Back on the bridge, the official ceremony was coming to an end. The important guests were making their way to the reception tent, where champagne and appetizers were waiting. The wind was getting stronger, but it felt refreshing and full of energy, not chilly. Sebastian stopped Fiona just as she turned to walk with the mayor. He gently guided her over to the railing, away from all the microphones. "Wait," he said, his voice becoming much more serious. "There is just one more thing before all the chaos of the party begins." "We have a very busy schedule, Seb," Fiona joked, looking at her watch, but her heart began to beat faster when she saw how serious he looked. "The governor is waiting for us." Sebastian paid no attention to the schedule. He reached inside his suit jacket. He did not pull out a small, velvet box for a ring. For them, that would have been too predictable, too much of a public show. Instead, what he took out was a small, folded piece of paper. The paper was yellow from age, and its edges were soft and worn down. Fiona accepted it, her forehead wrinkling with confusion. Her hands were trembling a little as she carefully unfolded the delicate paper. It was a simple napkin, a cheap brown one from their college cafeteria, with a date from 10 years ago. Drawn on it, in blue pen ink that was now fading, was a simple, almost childlike drawing of two stick figures on a massive bridge. Beneath the sketch, in Sebastian's familiar messy handwriting, were the words, "One day you are going to build this, and I will be right there to see it." Fiona felt all the air rush out of her lungs. The memory came flooding back, almost knocking her over. She remembered the long nights studying in the library, drinking cheap coffee, and Sebastian being the only one who would listen to her crazy dreams. He had faith in her long before she had any real work to show. He had faith in her even before she had faith in herself. Hot tears suddenly filled her eyes. "You saved this?" she whispered, looking down at the napkin. "For 10 whole years after everything." "I saved it," Sebastian replied, his voice heavy with emotion as he moved closer to block the wind for her. "Because I never forgot who you really were, Fiona. Even when you lost sight of it, even when he did everything to make you forget, I knew that amazing architect was still inside you, just waiting for the chance to create something incredible." He reached over and took her hand in his, weaving their fingers together. His hand felt warm, strong, and like it would never let go. "You have built your bridge, Fiona," Sebastian whispered, looking straight into her eyes. "You have proven everything that you ever needed to. Now, I want us to build something new. I want to build our life together. No more hiding, no living in the shadows, no silent partners, just you and me." Fiona gazed at him. She really truly saw him. She saw all the years they had been friends, the quiet way he supported her during the worst days of her marriage, and the patient love that waited for her to be free and complete again. She understood that while she was the one who built the bridge, he was the solid ground that she stood on. She let the napkin fall from her fingers, allowing the wind to carry it and her past away. Then she wrapped her arms tightly around his neck, hiding her face in his shoulder. "Yes," she whispered against his coat. The word was swept away by the breeze, but it was heard by the only person who mattered. Just us. Finally, high over the city, with the sounds of celebration and the wind whistling through the bridge cables, the architect had finally come home. Her home was not in a luxury apartment, or a corporate meeting room, or a giant structure of steel. It was right there, in the arms of the man who loved her back when no one else even noticed her. And as the sun started to go down over Vidia Harbor, coloring the sky with amazing shades of gold and purple, Fiona Mercer, who would soon be Fiona Hale, smiled. She had stunned the entire world. She brought a billionaire to his knees, but the most important thing was that she had discovered who she truly was. The statue had been broken into dust. The real woman had emerged. What a truly amazing journey. From being treated like she was just a piece of furniture to showing the world she was the genius behind the city's most impressive new building, Fiona's story is the perfect example of why you should never count out the quiet people. Dominic found out the hard way that when you treat a diamond like it is just a piece of glass, you are going to get hurt when it finally breaks. So what are your thoughts? Do you think Dominic should have gotten another chance? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? And would you pick the loyal, best friend, Sebastian, over the rich husband? Tell me what you think down in the comments. If you like this story about revenge, success, and real love, please go ahead and hit that like button. Share this video with people you know, and make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell. That way you will never miss out on a new story. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.